Hi, everyone. This is Mason Winfield, the host of the SWP Project. As you know, we're devoted to tracking the roots of the paranormal. I've never been a fan of top-down stuff, top-down management, top-down solutions. I just don't think they work. I'm a roots-up guy. I study the paranormal from the roots. And part of that is that we find people who are experts in various roots of subjects that contribute to our understanding of the paranormal. Today, we have a feng shui master. Her name is Linda Elson. Our program today is titled, I got all these notes here, look at that. Wind, Water, and Whites, Hauntings, Feng Shui, and the Energies of the Earth. And I'd like to introduce our guest, Linda Elson. And I would like to ask her, would you talk a little bit about yourself, your training, your philosophy, and introduce yourself?
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Linda Elson, and I'm a certified feng shui practitioner and president and owner of Feng Shui World. And I have been a professional feng shui practitioner and teacher of the ancient art for the past 21 years. And feng shui is known as the ancient art and science of placement. And it's a process to create balance and harmony in an environment. It's all about being in rhythm with nature. So we talk about what we acknowledge as being the 5 elements in feng shui. So we talk about earth. So we look at earth energies. Of course, it is earth-based science, if you will. We'll use that a little bit loosely, but there is a great analysis to it. But we think about, incredible mountain ranges. We think about the Grand Tetons, or we think about the Adirondack Mountains here in New York State. We talk about water. So water like the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, Lake Erie and Buffalo, New York. We talk about metal. We talk about digging into the earth and finding the precious ores. Talk about wood element, things growing, wonderful trees, forests. Earth, fire, metal, water, wood. I must be missing something in there. But I am a practitioner who analyzes space. So typically, for the most part, I probably do about 70% residential, 30% commercial, and I help people to create feel good in an environment. Of course, everything isn't always about feel good. Sometimes I'm brought in to troubleshoot, like maybe why something is off, maybe why a person has, was thriving, for X amount of years business-wise, and then suddenly there was a turn of events, or maybe something health-wise. I was just contacted by someone this morning who owns a number of properties in Western New York, and all of a sudden doesn't feel like they're attracting the right people at their Airbnbs or in their rental properties, or a building is very, very old in our Elmwood Village district here in Buffalo, New York. And they feel that, again, there's been some, maybe not the most fortunate of events happening. So I'm being brought in to clear it. We can talk about clearings a little bit and analyze and maybe help redirect the energy. So that's a little bit about what I do in a nutshell.
Well, thank God you didn't comment about my house. We had that meeting here. Oh my God.
I have a feeling you might be onto some intuitive good feng shui. You have a beautiful home. Absolutely.
Well, you avoided commenting on my housekeeping, which I was honored with it. You get back.
Only when I'm on the clock, Mason. I'm not going to. Although we were in a business meeting, right?
Oh, sure. Hey, so feng shui means wind and water, correct?
Yes, literally translated. So, it evolved out of, the ancient Chinese culture. So we say literally translated, there's lots of imagery. So it said that energy travels everywhere like the wind, and then it settles like the water. So, wow. That's a lovely thought. Of course, sometimes the winds can be turbulent, but we hope that the wind will be gentle and then settle appropriately. But yes, literal translation.
What's the bagua?
So the bagua, and people will see it spelled different ways. As Mason was saying it, bagua. In traditional, again, we're translating here. It's traditionally spelled P-A-Q-U-A. Sometimes you'll see B-A-G-U-A. So I just want to kind of clarify that for all the people maybe who've read a little bit about feng shui and how it's pronounced, but it's the energetic map that we work with in feng shui. And first of all, I want to say there's about 12 different styles of feng shui. So I practice what's known as classical traditional form feng shui, which looks at how energy changes over time. So I think this really lends itself and fits into some of our projects that we're going to be endeavoring in with the Spirit Way project, how energy changes over time. So it means, like, a family could have a house that's been, family again through generations, and at one time in life they all thrived, and then different things happened over time. Feng shui wise, we would say, maybe there was a shift in the energy. But let me go back to the Bagua map. So
That's
the Bagua
fascinating.
map looks at how your whole life is mapped out throughout your physical space. And again, with the type of feng shui that I practice, it looks at directions. So north, south, east, west, and the four subdirections. So we would say that your whole life is mapped out throughout this. So we'd say the north part of the home represents career or business endeavors, or your life's path and your journey, because certainly a little kid at 3 years old is not doesn't have a 9 to 5, right? But they might be dreaming about wanting to be a fire person when they grow up, right? Or a doctor or something like that, or an author, right? And then the Northeast, we say that honors your knowledge, your education, your research, your travel, the development of inner wisdom. Then the east part of the home, we think about where the sun rises. That is health and family, living a good, happy, healthy, long life. It also honors the eldest son. The southeast rules wealth and prosperity. It's also abundance, and it's about being in the attitude of gratitude. But really, if we think about improving the bottom line, it's the southeast sector that we look at. The South is about fame or reputation, what you're known for. Mason, being a fabulous, intriguing author, right? And the great mind. That was a good cue.
Your check is in the mail.
Well, thank you. But it's also tapping into our passion in life, our drive. And if our feng shui's off, we might not have enough drive or enough passion. And that would be a whole other topic. But the Southwest rules, love and partnership, marriage in traditional circles. It also rules the female heads of household, the matriarch of a family. The West rules children, our creativity, but it also honors our own little inner child and communications and playfulness or joy. Is someone having enough fun in life, or if the fun was turned off a long time ago, what's happening in that space? Northwest is helpful people, mentors, spirituality, the male heads of a household, patriarchs. And then we'd say the center of the home, and a business too, of course, we call that the chi center. So that's like the center, essence, and core of the space. So the thought and the theory of the feng shui Bagua map is, oh, you want to give me a timeout? I know I don't come up for air, Mason.
No. You're doing great, but I'd like you to show us a Bagua.
Oh, Mason, you didn't tell me to bring my props.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
you know what we're going to do? You know what we can do, Mason? And I know, we're going to be popping this on Facebook. You know what I'll do? I'll put a Bagua map in chat. How about that? Or in the comments section. Or I have a fabulous article, I think, right? Because, someone else manages my website. I think that can even give people a free copy.
That would be awesome. See, the reason I brought that up is because we're talking about this wonderful insight about the directions, and the general public. Wait, a Bagua is an 8-sided.
You're right. There you go. Yes,
sort of like that. Maybe I could find one. So, but Max can edit. Max says I can edit that in. So what'll happen is when you start talking, Max will just put up a Bagua.
Beautiful. And you know what I'll do? I'll send you and Max a great link to my website that has the Bagua map, and then also enticing, and nice for the people.
Perfect.
If they sign up for my newsletter, they get a free Bagua map. But then again, it's branded with my company, and hey, I'm talking today, right?
Yeah.
But if Max, take creative license. If you see one that's prettier, by all means. But I think the one we have on our website is pretty decent.
Yeah. Some of what first of all, I'm getting so many thoughts out of some of the things you're saying, because I have sort of felt for a while that there was a geological component. I'm not saying a cause, but I'm saying a component to a lot of the paranormal phenomena people witness, including ghosts in their house.
Yeah.
And you talked about souls. It's like somebody is in their house and they're doing really well for 30 years or whatever. They're doing really well. And then all of a sudden things kind of turn on them. And, you find that with hauntings, like a building, people who live in a building for a period of years will talk about experiencing psychic phenomena, and then it stops. And then it may start up again. And
Yes.
the only thing we got to prove by that is the folkloric cycle. But I thought that was really cool, because it might not be something the spooks want to do. It might be something to do with the natural energies of the site.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry for yakking so much. I threw you
No,
off.
that's great. And I'm sure some of the professional dowsers on the team, would have something to say about, underwater streams and things like that.
I wish we had a couple more dowsers. Now, I know you have done dowsing and you can do it.
And yes, I can. And I do dowsing. I mostly use dowsing for when I do clearings of homes and spaces and businesses. So I use it to as a tool to move energy, maybe that's not of the most, the highest and the best. So I use it from a clearing standpoint. I'm not a ghostbuster, and I never claimed to be a ghostbuster, but when energy has gotten too stagnant or stale, yeah, there you go.
Well, I wonder to myself sometimes, I have friends who are ghost hunters and I get along with them fine, some of them. But there ought to be no logical connection between a camera and a ghost. It's like, just because you're taking pictures after dark doesn't mean you're gifted with the ability to talk to the powers that do tend on mortal thoughts. I mean, this is just not, I don't know why. And some ghost hunters, one of my cats is scratching my furniture. I gotta get, they love these podcasts,
I'm sure.
But it's like, I think one of the biggest mistakes people in any discipline in life can make is to think they know more than they do. And it's like, stay in your lane, and I think that's one thing we in Spirit Way Project, because interest of full disclosure, Linda is a founding member of Spirit Way Project's podcast wing, and she's going to be involved in some of our endeavors at interpreting sites. But I think that's one of the virtues of us in Spirit Way Project, is that we stay in our lanes. It's like we don't, we have definite fields of expertise and we acknowledge it, So with that said, I would like to mention, we talked a little bit about the power of water. It floats like wind and settles like water. I heard not that long ago a story about someone hearing a ritual going on a summer night in Red Jacket Park in Buffalo. And Red Jacket, I don't think I've ever been there, but it's not a very big park. And I guess there's some wooded, some patches of pretty good wood, pretty good trees. And that a group of people were in this park one evening chanting a ritual. And my witness said it just sounded like a TV spell. And I remember telling this story to another friend who is a traveling, wandering Buddhist monk. He's not a cloistered Buddhist monk. He's a different kind of monk, but he studied a lot of Buddhism. And he said, I remember telling it to him and going, what do you make out of that? He goes, well, that park is, he's from Buffalo, said that park is right along a creek. It's right along the creek. It goes right into the Great Lakes, right into Lake Erie and through Ontario. And he said, anybody casting a spell, that's a good place. If you want to cast a spell that's going to travel, right alongside that creek is a great place. Is that consistent with the thinking of feng shui in your experience?
Now that's interesting. Now maybe I'll circle back to feng shui. Well, certainly water is known as a carrier in feng shui, and I think about number one, we're made up of a huge percentage of water, so that how that impacts us in our life experiences. But again, I'll circle back to feng shui, but you know what that almost reminds me of? He's, I believe, deceased now, but are you familiar with the work of Dr. Emoto? He was the Japanese scientist who believed that if you say beautiful, loving things to the glass of water, you're beautiful, you nourish me, you're exquisite, that, when we drink that, it's like, we sparkle. So he did this whole study of he studied water crystals. And then he also studied water crystals to the effect of saying, you're ugly, you'll never become anything, you're not the prettiest snowflake in the world. And then the water crystals started looking dark and twisted, but the ones that were told, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, you're incredibly bright and witty, they were looking phenomenal. So I think about whether, and again, that maybe reminded me maybe some sort of Wiccan, what you were describing kind of, made me think of maybe a Wiccan gathering or something. But hey, it could have been one of the wandering monks too, putting beautiful, positive energy into the water. Again, remember, then the water, if you believe in the Dr. Emoto stuff, then carries it out to the world. And then, we think about power sources here in Western New York, like Niagara Falls. There's power in that being carried, but that's a fascinating, I'm sure we could have a much longer discussion on that, but that's my immediate 2 cents. I don't know how much I tied that into feng shui, but it is one of the major elements that we work with. But I also think that, water in feng shui, there's different qualities of water. There's, the raging Niagara Falls, which you probably wouldn't want to build a house on the edge of that. That would be, it's too yang. We talk about yin and yang in feng shui. But then, a stagnant stream, by the same token, is, having energy become stuck. So
that's
too totally answered your question, but that's my 2 cents on that one.
So yin and yang. So yin is sort of the bland, featureless, still quality, and yang is the challenging. Am I correct?
Not exactly. So on the most simplistic level, we would say the yin is the feminine, the yang or the yang is the masculine. And when we're looking at a home, pretty much most of our homes are rather yang or yang, however you want to pronounce that. I say yang, you say yang, tomato, all that kind of good stuff.
Well,
right?
I think you probably say it right.
No. I mean, well, just like there's different ways of pronouncing feng shui. So anyhow.
How should I say it?
But most of our environments, I'm stereotyping here, are yang in their experience. We have the, our life experiences, we're moving around, we're doing a podcast today, we're cooking dinner later, we might meditate, which is more of a yin type of activity. People who have children, dogs, the cat, who was just in the shot, they're creating that, they're moving the chi, they're moving the energy. That's yang. Yin is more still. When we go into stillness and we're meditating, that's yin. If I'm doing a feng shui consultation and, say if it's a guy, right? And he wants to attract a lovely lady into his life, and it's all very hard and edgy and black. I mean, I'm kind of stereotyping like a bachelor type environment. You have to find that balance between the masculine and the feminine. Even if I'm looking at, if I'm stereotyping, if we are talking about a female who has like this whole like little frilly environment, and again, we have to find that balance in the feng shui, that there's a balance between the masculine and the feminine. When we go back to subject matters that, you write about and that Spirit Way project will be exploring, what I've noticed over time is that houses that tend are dwellings or environments, because again, feng shui originally came from the land, and we can talk more about that, about impacting the earth energies. But when homes become too yin, too quiet, I think about, Mrs. Havisham, from Great Expectations, sitting, decaying in her wedding dress, right? In great literature, that's become too yin. So when things get stuck, I mean, even on a most basic level, when I go out and do a consultation, if someone has lots of clutter stacking up, the environment's becoming, it's not saying that just because a person has clutter that they're going to attract paranormal spirits. But in everyday life, we want to find that balance. Now, certainly some things like your friend, the monk, right? They live a more yin type life, right? It's more quiet. It's more still. A church environment, it's more yin, even though stereotypical churches or temples bring people in and they chant or they pray or they ring bells or burn incense. Does that make sense?
It's certainly a more abstract way of looking at it than I perhaps am ready for at the moment. I would say, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it does make sense, just maybe not to me,
Okay,
But,
so tell me again what your interpretation of it is. Let's go back to that.
I just think, well, first of all, my interpretation is pretty simplistic. I never studied this art, which is why I'm enjoying this program so much. Rather than deal with my blundering, I'd rather ask you a few.
I became the interviewer for a second, didn't I, Mason?
Let's not highlight my inaccuracies quite so, because we all know they're there. Let's talk just a little bit about, well, first of all, I wanted to ask you this. Do you think it's possible that, Frederick Law Olmsted, the landscape architect,
yes,
who did these wonderful parkways around Buffalo, do you think there's a possibility, because they say he spent time in China as a young man, do you think maybe Frederick Law Olmsted could have been picking up on feng shui and Asian principles of landscape to be working on? I do,
and I don't know for fact, except that you like you said, there are reports that he studied in China and around the Pacific Rim. But absolutely, I use the example here in Western New York, and of course, what's the big beautiful park in New York City? I should know this. I used to live in
Central Park.
Central Park. There we go. He also designed Central Park. So the idea of meandering pathways, that's creating flow. That's also like a water imaging, a path, not a straight pathway. Meandering pathways are considered water. I don't think we call it Mirror Lake anymore in Delaware Park, but it might be called Hoyt Lake at this point. But again, having a waterway, that's the water element. Almost all of the elements are present. All of the wonderful trees that are growing are considered wood element. Strategic placement of benches here or there, or metal lampposts are metal element. And then some of the great stone bridges, so like, kind of carved out, almost looks like a moon gate. Maybe that would be a great image to put up, would be, what is a moon gate? And that is a beautiful symbolism of both heaven and earth, because while feng shui isn't considered an earth-based science, it also, right, it's kind of like, some astrologers may say, well, we study the planets. And in feng shui, we talk about, out there influences meeting the earth. So it's where heaven meets earth. So some of his bridges, and there's one in particular, I guess I'll have to take a picture of that next time I'm in Delaware Park, kind of almost even reminds me of a moon gate. A moon gate is a circle within a square. So it's considered where heaven meets earth. And in feng shui, what I want to say is we talk about the cosmic trinity. We talk about earth luck, heaven luck, and man say person luck, people luck. So, the heaven luck, some people could say that's your karma that you came in with, if you believe in karma. It's, how the cosmos is influencing us. The earth luck is, like, say, working with an earth-based science, like feng shui. And I say, I'm putting quotes around the art and the science of the earth energies. And then person luck, it's like, hey, you might have some information on Mason, go to your knowledge and education sector, write your next, best-selling book, and you don't pick up a pen for an entire year. The man person luck is not helping that along, even though we're feng shuiing you in that direction. But back to that bridge idea, like some of the big heavy stone there. So, and then again, these parks, our Central Park, our Delaware Park here in Buffalo, they feel incredible to be in. And to me, that is what good feng shui is about, because it comes from nature. And, feng shui, while it originated in ancient China, has been really practiced much throughout the Pacific Rim. And it was the ancient emperors that you could call them, called on the wise people, or the modern day geomancers. That's the word for a feng shui practitioner in the UK, or, feng shui practitioner like myself. We studied the land, like, is the land solid, good, and strong for us to build the imperial palace? A lot of time, like, you'll ever look at a picture of the skyline of Hong Kong, like there's the mountains looming, behind them, and we'd say the wealth and the knowledge is held in the mountains. How are the waterways? Are they flowing for transportation? Water also rules communication as well. I've also noticed, this goes back to maybe like we'll do the paranormal tie-in. If people's homes or businesses, dwellings, anytime there's any kind of a leak, a water issue, a backup, a lot of times in feng shui, we interpret that to mean that there's something like a backup of an overpouring of emotions. It can also sometimes relate to prosperity. There'll be a leak in maybe, so again, that tie into why was, once the family, the greatest purveyors of X, Y, and Z, and with that came great wealth. And then that kind of dissipated over time. So a little bit of a tangent there.
That's a good one.
Okay, good. I don't know where I was at. So
I do that all the time. I do that all the time. Here's another one for you. There is a filmmaker in New York City, very bright young man named Ted Timrek. And I will never forget seeing one of his productions at a conference once about Frederick Law Olmsted. And he also had the idea that Frederick Law Olmsted may have spent a lot of time in the Hudson and Mohawk valleys, and he may have been exposed to the mysticism of the Six Nations, the Longhouse people, Iroquoians, and they had their own sort of a landscape mysticism. And many people regard me as some kind of authority on the Six Nations, and I tell people, man, I just admire what they do, but I ain't no expert. But do you think it's possible that a form of feng shui could have gotten into the Native American, First Nations, whatever they want to be called, systems of the Northeast, concepts of landscape power like Manitou, like Orenda?
Yes, absolutely. And I've never studied that from a Native American standpoint, but it said that every major world, not every, but many major world cultures have some form of placement. Just one of the most well-known. And again, it's thousands of years old. It's 3,000 plus years old. I think about like the Hindu culture, they have the Vastu, and that is their form and analysis of placement. So absolutely. And again, it's about being in rhythm and harmony with the land. So there's many ways to the mountain, and I no doubt that the Native Americans would be tapped into that. They've been, and again, I'm not an authority on it, and much more than I, but the earth, the fire, the metal, the water, the wood, they probably get into air probably. And
the 5 elements.
Yeah, they include air in there. Air
Yeah,
fits somewhere in there, but we don't recognize it as a specific element, how we're working it, whether it's in balance or not in feng shui.
Really? Well, I guess it's kind of, I mean, that was one of the reasons there was so much tension between the first Europeans and the Native Americans of the Northeast, because they didn't have a sense of ownership of physical, of land. So a Euro can come up and go, I'd like to buy that piece of land from you. And they're kind of thinking, well, that's like coming up and going, I want to rent the air. It's like, hey guys, sure, I'll take whatever you got. No problem, man. Fixed him, didn't I? Yeah, but the trouble is, Western concepts of possession of land were very different. Do you think there's a faint, this is going to be really off base here, but some anthropologists have postulated that some of the most fundamental attitudes of Native American people in the America, well, where else? The Americas, they look Asian. That it almost could be a 20,000-year-old psychological connection between. Do you think there's a faint possibility that this concept of earthly form and power and all that might even be something that's fundamental to the psyche of people of that ancestry?
I do. And I also, here's one for you on a really basic level, is that so I analyze for a living, right? So I analyze people's spaces as a feng shui practitioner. And what I always find, and it's very specific. So it's like when a house was built, when people moved in, dates of major renovations or changes. And then I study energetic patterns and I make recommendations about, where some of the best sectors are, how to boost that, where they might be a little bit weaker, etc. And wait, I'm losing my thought again, Mason. I don't know how that's happening, but that's happening.
Oh, that happens all the time.
Bring me back. Where am I going with this?
Let's see. I think you began talking about analyzing people's spaces.
Yeah, and what did you say right before that?
Oh,
you said so much, Mason.
Was known to me and God, and now is known only to God.
Oh, could they know? Okay, Native Americans representing some Chinese ancestors, and could they know?
I know. Something unique to the psyche that.
Yes, absolutely. Just like, okay, so where I'm going with this about my own clients is, so I analyze and I'm working with a formula. Now, I often will find, not all the time, it always fascinates me where people may have gotten it intuitively right. Okay. So like, for an example, you have a fireplace behind you. And of course, there's a wood mantle and there's brick there, but it also, do you have a mirror above that, man?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe one day if I come out and I'm doing a feng shui analysis, I may find out in my analysis that you actually needed some metal element. So decoratively, metal can be represented through mirrors. And I'll be like, oh, wow, isn't that interesting? Like Mason got that intuitively right. So it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes people's environments are completely off and they really needed me to show up there.
So pick up your clean laundry. You can't just pile it on the other side of the bed for your cats to crash on.
Yeah. And you know what, I'm not an expert on talking about this, but I think there's studies on people like doing something on one side of the world and then, on the exact opposite side of the world, one person's doing it here and the other person's, doing it there, but they've never met. I don't know where I'm going with that one.
Well, no, I think that personally, it sounds like you're talking a little bit about ESP. And,
well, that's true. Yeah, I guess I am.
I mean, they even got this observation about monkeys on a couple different islands.
I was thinking about it involves monkeys. Yeah.
And well, I think it's sort of an example of an instinctive transfer of knowledge, or maybe it's extrasensory, but I think it's getting very trendy these days to have a materialistic, mechanistic, structuralist, reductionist view of reality. Like reality is exclusively physical. There's no mind, no free will, there's no soul, there's no spirit, there's no God, there's no afterlife, and therefore any discussion of it is absolutely useless. And there's this theory. Somebody wants us to buy that. And there's so many holes in it. It's a joke. I mean, ESP, frankly, I know there's people who still argue about it, but I don't see why. I mean, animal ESP, I think it's been very well established in experiments. And, a lot of our skeptical friends like to rebut stories of, a UFO abductee saying, I went for a ride on a saucer last week, and you know who I saw in that flying saucer? There was Bigfoot and Elvis, and they were like playing cards, and they had herb tea, and, they love debunking the dumb stuff. But when it comes to the serious stuff, they don't want to take that on. When people believe they are living or frequenting a haunted site, this is a haunted house or a haunted building tends to be a little zone of EHE, exceptional human experience. I mean, when people live in a haunted house and you interview them, they don't just go, "Oh, I saw a ghost." They go, "Man, lights flickered and heard some crazy sounds, and the animals react, and moving objects." They give you a lot of mojo they're talking about. And I wonder if you think there could be a source for haunted phenomena that has an explanation in your discipline of feng shui.
Well, I'm not a ghost expert. I always like to use that disclaimer, but
Neither am I. Nobody is.
Yeah, but clearly in those types of situations, there's something off in the house. And to me, something off in the house can be that there is some sort of an imbalance. I also think that predecessor energy means, like, if you have a multitude of families, or even within the same line in a lineage that have lived in a home, although that's rather rare today. But I feel that, we're all having a human experience, that's for sure. But I think that layers and life experience, either positively or negatively, can get layered up. And if you have too much of the not so great layering up, I think that can start to contribute to energy weakening, maybe it being more vulnerable, that, again, these spirits, these entities, if you will, can come in and, start doing their thing. But I think that, and again, I'm not a Ghostbuster, but I think that potentially, some more basic environments can be cleared, the energy can be altered, a property can get back into repair versus disrepair. Although, Mason, you've interviewed, hundreds, if not thousands of people on this topic. I'm sure there's some people that live in absolutely beautiful, totally upkept homes that probably also have some activity. Because going back to the land, I also think that sometimes that energy can be coming from a land. Like, you could have a new built home, and if the land is built on a place that, maybe there's an ancient burial ground nearby or under there, they maybe, kind of pissed off the spirits when they were, digging the dwelling or the commercial building. That could be, them acting out, so to speak, and contributing to some of those experiences.
Well, I have found a profile of buildings thought to be haunted. And incidentally, I would presume that it's a sort of a feng shui concept that good and evil are not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a balance that's positive for people's comfort level, or some kind of a out of balance, and that's troubling. And would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about one client in particular that whenever I come out to people's homes and I'm working on the feng shui, I ask them what their goals are, what are they working on. I give them a copy of that Bagua map that we're going to put up on the screen. And I usually say to them, if we could possibly, tip the energetic scales, what are we working on? So there's that part of it. But I remember this one particular lady that I worked with in South Buffalo in the past year had said that she had some spirit activity up in her attic. And she works out of her home. And basically they were right above her, and they were rather active. And maybe they hadn't been, and then all of a sudden they got stirred again. So I worked with aligning her where her desk placement should be. I think we changed the wall color because it was off. The elements were in conflict. Like, I don't remember exactly, but so for an example, if we say paint the walls green, we mean you need some wood element here. But if the walls are gray, like my background, and you really need wood, you think about an axe going up to a tree, it's cutting energy. There's something that's off. And then up in her attic space where, there was some activity, I believe we did a little bit of clearing up there, and we put some protector. There's some symbology that we work with in feng shui, or there's stones. Some stones can be more protective. You think about stones coming from the earth. And what she reported to me then, as the months were progressing after she implemented her feng shui, they quieted down. It was like they agreed, if you will, or the energetic experience was, they were still there and she was aware of it, but they were no longer like, pounding on the rafters anymore. It's like they were there, she was here, and they had a spirit of cooperation. And she believes that, that was part of the alignment of the feng shui, with her happy on the earth plane, then acknowledging part of it is for her, it was about acknowledging that they were there. But again, I'm not a Ghostbuster.
Well, you're making some wonderful contributions. Now, my old friend, the exorcist, he was a Franciscan friar at St. Bonaventure, Father Alphonsus, old buddy. And he used to conjecture, because he so often found a connection between like electrical phenomena. With haunted houses, people, because it seems like if humanity invents something, the spooks can play around with it, whether it's radios. I mean, you'd think this is counterintuitive unless there was some electrical component.
Absolutely.
And Father Alphonsus used to conjecture that maybe the spooks are everywhere. Maybe they're all around us. And the only place they show themselves is the only places they can. It's where they've got free power floating around to kind of and a lot of parapsychologists have spent a lot of mental time, as well as spilling a lot of ink, on trying to figure out what is the power source of psychic phenomena. Because, just saying, oh, it's magic, or oh, it's the spooks. I mean, that isn't enough. Wait a minute, how does it happen? And a lot of them have conjectured that whatever I refer to just generally as the spooks, but whatever these forces are, to manifest something, they yank energy, and the energy might be in the air, it might be in the earth, it might be both. I think your discipline is probably a very good explanation for that you can sort of turn off the energy, and maybe the stuff is still there, but nobody is bothered by it anymore.
Right. And quite frankly, some people actually enjoy it too. I'm sure you found the people who enjoy it.
I do too. Yeah, I really. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah. And and I've always said of myself, like I'm a very intuitive person. I'm very perceptive. I pick up a lot on energy. But I remember being very young when I just kind of made a statement out to the universe, like, just don't show yourself to me. Like, I don't want to see it, right? I don't want to see like that ghost or that spirit, because we know that some people have seen them, right? But I have firsthand, experience in my own family with experiencing, spirit communicating through a telephone that hasn't worked in years and
Oh,
started
wow.
ringing mysteriously. I remember too a story, and I mean I experienced it firsthand. Years ago, one of my grandmothers had passed away when I was in college, and I went to school locally at Canisius College in Buffalo, New York,
It's a nice
and
place.
my mother was a caregiver for my grandmother after, before she had passed away. My grandmother had advanced Alzheimer's disease. And
Oh,
one late night, I was part of a theater group at Canisius, and I was still at school, and my mother called me. My grandmother had passed away. I was an actor at the time, and we were doing a play, and it was a late night rehearsal. And my mother called me, and my mother doesn't really get freaked out about too much stuff. And she didn't have any activity in her house, but all of a sudden she called and she was freaked out, and she said, Linda, the door, and by the way, my grandparents had built the house that she was currently living in as the caregiver for my grandmother. Grandmother just passed away. Grandfather was already deceased. Their doorbells hadn't worked for years, and they had a little tape on it that said, doorbell does not work. And it was like those old, like big, long, clanking chime doorbell ringing. And she said the doorbell started ringing
oh
and the
my.
chimes wouldn't stop clanking. So she was freaked
Oh,
out. So
wow.
I remember
Oh,
like two of my guy friends, from the theater group, at midnight, went over to my mother's house, and they actually took the big long chime bells, off the doorbell holder, put them in the
sure.
closet, and then we didn't have a problem anymore.
Was it an electric doorbell?
I think it was, but they hadn't worked in years, Mason, in years,
Yep.
and shortly after my grandmother died.
I first of all, that is cool. That
Yeah,
is really beautiful. Um, Maybe off the air or some other time, I'll ask you a few more specs. Like where was the house and what street was it on? And
sure.
I may ask stuff like that. But they've studied poltergeist phenomena, and poltergeist phenomena. I call it phenomena because it's not presumed to be the intentional activity of disembodied spirits. But poltergeist displays, it basically means an outbreak of physical stuff around the house. And when it gets really developed, like a constant long pattern, you'd call it a poltergeist outbreak or episode or whatever. But the tiny little stuff that happens occasionally, I mean, that could be just as supernatural. It just hasn't become a pattern yet.
True.
But they did studies that were trying to figure out how can a poltergeist turn a radio or a TV on or off without physically flipping the switch? And the answer to that is a pretty simple one. It's just making an electrical connection. That's what flipping the switch does. But you can do that, or something can do that without doing the mechanics of flipping a switch. It's just they just join a connection and on it comes. So I think maybe as we are mentioning, in a site that's got a lot of this energy floating around, it seems like that stuff might be much more likely.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see, Linda. I'm fascinating myself with my own erudication, but
I'm sure.
I made that word up. Does feng shui make any statements about the afterlife?
Well, that's a great question, and an interesting one to ponder. And to a degree, yes. Now, the original form of feng shui thousands of years ago was to help with the placement for the burial of the dead. And that's considered a very yin form of feng shui. It's not a style that I practice, but there are some practitioners like in Malaysia, around the Pacific Rim, where these super wealthy tycoons are paying millions of dollars to have the right future plot for the family with the right land form of the feng shui, because the thought and the theory is that in that style of feng shui is that if you keep your ancestors happy, they will look down and bless the family and, help guide from behind the scenes, if you will, so to speak. Now, while I don't practice that, my own father passed away many years ago, and I don't even know if I was even a feng shui practitioner at that time. And, as a man off the boat from Italy, I don't know if he would have understood feng shui, although he built homes for a living. But I will tell you what I do is at least once a year, and it's usually around Memorial Day, I will visit, his headstone at Mount Calvary Cemetery. I will make sure I spruce it up. I'll add the topsoil, I'll make sure the flowers look nice. I'll put a couple of rose quartz crystals. That's a feng shui thing for peace and harmony. And, say, I do believe in prayer, and I do pray and meditate. So I'll say a little prayer for him and my family. And my grandparents happen to be buried at that same plot. So to me, that's a form of going, hey, I'm doing something nice for you. And then it's really interesting. This cemetery has a lot of Italian Americans and Polish type people buried there, if you just look at the names on the headstones.
Yeah.
And I show up once a year, and it's really interesting. There's this one headstone in this environment. Oh boy, Mason, I got a flash that says your battery's running low, so I'm gonna talk quick because
we've been going, we can wrap up pretty quick.
Okay, so I'll tell you the rest of the story. So there is one headstone not far from where my father's buried across the way that is, again, all in, I'm not, some sort of calligraphy. Was it Chinese? You get the idea. Not that I go that often, but whenever I'm there, this woman is sprucing up that headstone. So truly, she also believes in keeping them happy. So that's part of it, is if you keep the ancestors happy. Now, I will say I have done, I don't practice yin feng shui, but I remember one of my really great clients, her mother passed away a few years ago, and I did help her design what the headstone looked like, where it was placed, what direction. I believe the person was, being buried in a coffin. So what direction, and even though the body decomposes in the afterlife, they would be placed. So yeah, it does acknowledge it 100%. And like I said, there are tycoons in Malaysia with some of my grandmasters that pay millions of dollars for the right plot. And again, the idea of keeping them happy, and then they bless the family. If they're unhappy, then, there can be discord, or maybe you could even say activity, on the earth plane.
So Japan and China are two of the most developed, nations in the world. Are they still using feng shui in their city planning?
So, I have not been to either country, I should say, yet. Although I remember one of my clients, a lot of it you'll hear that, well, let me say this. One of my clients, who's an educator, a very high level educator, visited China a few years ago on an educational exchange. And she was so excited to talk to people about feng shui, right? Because that was the original country where it evolved out of. And she said people, for the most part, would say, oh, that is, that's superstition. Or, oh, yes, my great grandmother used to believe in that. And a lot of in China, it's been banned on and off, for decades and centuries here and there. So a lot of it, the masters went to different parts of the Pacific Rim and were able to, practice their art and science. And then it landed in, not in Western Europe. Well, here I am in Western New York doing this, but it landed in the, in the US, probably, I'm, losing track of time now, probably like 40, 50 years ago at this point. But yeah, and I will tell you that we talk about annual energy changing. We're in the year of the rabbit. We're going to be going into the year of the dragon. This whole big 20-year shift is taking place in 2024. And I'm told that in current day, everyday China, like you couldn't even get your hands on that material and how energy is changing. And a lot of my feng shui students over the time will say, you know, I read this in this book and it says to do that. And I read another book and it says to do that. Well, first of all, people really don't know that there's different styles of feng shui. But it is said that the ancient emperors found that the energy and the information was so powerful that they didn't want it to be in the hands of the masses. So they hired people like you, Mason, to write the book to say, put the fountain there, but really it should be there. You know, they were throwing people off. So if you study feng shui, like I could go through like the internet and bookstores and get my red pen out and go, nope, this is not correct. I can't believe they just said this. So there's a lot of false information out there too. And you really have to know how to decipher it. And I don't love that as a practitioner, but again, there's a lot of false information out there. I'm sure you can say that for a lot of topics, but certainly there is in feng shui.
You really can. I remember being at a conference, probably a year and a half ago in East Aurora, and someone at the table who was a college professor, and these people from all over the nation. And this woman at the table who's a college professor started talking about something to do with Celtic compass directions, color coordination. And I, I'm not the world's expert on Celtic culture and society, but I've pursued an understanding of the four elements and their use in various societies. And I had never heard that out of the classic Celts, that they had this organized system. I mean, there are some things in some cultures that are not in others.
Sure.
And then they got something that isn't in that one. But I remember asking the lady, well, where do you get this? And she named some Wiccan author, probably published by, what's the big Wiccan publisher? I don't know. But at any rate, I said, wait a minute, that's not a source. She's probably putting her impressions together, and just because people do that these days.
Yeah.
And you cannot explain symbolism to a beginner, particularly an entitled one. It's like, I just realized there's no way I can try to explain, the compass symbolism and the colors and there's no way I can put this together for this individual, the four elements, the tarot. But I think, I with regret, Linda, I think we've talked each other out. And your skills have not been allowed to flower to their full effect, but I'm thrilled to have you with Spirit Way Project, because your insights are vital in an understanding of sites, and you're the only person I know around here that's going to be able to do what you're doing. So with deep gratitude, thanks for being on our program today.
Thanks
you for being a pillar of Spirit Way Project. So this is Mason Field again. Thank you, Linda Elson, for your insights. And we are all trying to pull together for a better and more peaceable world. And I want to thank our producer, Max Mezzio, and cheers to all.